This story starts once upon a time. Once upon a time, there were glaciers. The Driftless area, which is the part of the country that we live in, is the place that the glaciers didn't go. And the reason it's called the Driftless area is because glaciers carry glacial drift with them, and this part of the country doesn't have any of that. And thus, it's very, very rugged terrain. We're sort of zooming in on the farm here, and you can see from that map, that's about 400 vertical feet up and down. So when we take a walk on the farm, we take a lot of vertical walk too. Here's a picture where you take a Google map and you tip it over and you get a little sense of that terrain. It doesn't come out really good. It lays the outline of our farm on top of the terrain. And then just to give you a sense of the scale of what we're up to, this is a picture of the farm's outline laid on top of Grinnell. So when we take a walk, we're sort of walking in that kind of scale. I'm going to show you some before and after pictures now, just to give you a sense of sort of the way it was when we bought it back in 2000 and the way it is now. Marcy's going to talk a lot more about that in a minute. But the caution I want to sound right now is that it's easy to tell this story by saying, well, once upon a time we started and now here it's perfect. A better way to tell that story is like this. We're stumbling around in a lot of different dimensions with a lot of false starts and having a great time at it, but it's not a straight line by any means.
We do three main kinds of restoration projects in all of this. The one that's the least fun, but takes the most time, is controlling invasives. Invasive plants are ones that come from other places, and they're very aggressive. And there are lots of them. There are a lot of invasives I don't worry about because I just can't possibly get them all. But if they're very aggressive and spread quickly and prevent natives from growing, I try really hard to get rid of them. I spend a lot of the year doing this. Invasives grow very fast and very aggressively, so when I do tackle a species, there's often a lot of it to get rid of. Depending on which plant it is, I cut and treat the stems with herbicide or pull or mow or spray or whatever the most effective thing is. This is parsnip meadow, which used to be almost completely dominated by wild parsnip, which is one of the very bad invasives. And this is the way it looks now. I still have to pull some parsnip every year, but it gets better and better every year, and it looks a lot better than it used to. The second kind of project we do is a lot more fun, and that's planting prairies. Most of our prairies were planted on former crop fields. We had about 150 acres of them, of crop fields, when we bought the land. I collect seeds all summer and fall and let them dry in our house. Then I process them to make them easier to plant. I collect about half the seeds I plant and buy the rest. I can't possibly collect them all. And then I carry them up to the prairie, put them in these garbage cans, and carry them up before it snows so that I can plant them in the winter. And I plant them by throwing them up on the top of the snow, throwing out the seeds on top of the snow. And they work their way down into the soil. It takes a few years for a prairie to look like a prairie. The first year, the plants mostly grow down. And so the above ground part looks like a weed patch. We mow a lot the first couple years to control the weeds and invasives. And then after that, whenever it seems like we need to. The second year, the flowers start to bloom. And over the next few years, they start to look like real prairies. Now, most of our planted prairies are more than 10 years old. Our favorite kind of project is restoring the remnants of the pre-settlement landscape that we have. We have quite a few of them. We have prairies, we have wetland, and we have overgrown savanna. Our goal is to restore and expand as much of that as we can. The prairie remnants are mostly rocky points that face south. They were all grazed in the past. This was a dairy farm, and but the prairies on these points are very steep and rocky, so they never got plowed. And so they still have lots of prairie plants left. But over the years, they've been invaded by aggressive natives like birch and aspen and aggressive non-natives. So the goal in restoring these is mostly cutting weedy invaders so that they open up their prairie plants to the sun. Most of them are in good enough shape with enough natives still persisting in the soil and in the seed bank that we don't have to plant anything. So we just let them recover. This is another kind of prairie remnant we have. It's flatter and less dry, but for some reason nobody ever plowed it. This one was very overgrown when we first saw it, and we've been mowing it every year for about 15 years now, 18 years now. And the prairie plants are coming back. This year, last winter, we went in and cut out all those little trees that were in the middle and a lot of the ones around the edges. And now we're waiting to see what happens as it recovers. This is what it looked like about a week ago. We also have 700 acres of woods. Much of the woods used to be savanna, scattered burr or white oaks with prairie plants growing underneath. But the brush and small trees have invaded, like they've invaded everywhere. And it's just a complete impenetrable tangle underneath. You can't even walk underneath. So we're trying to restore a lot of those places. The main thing we do is cut and take and remove the small brush and trees that are under the oaks. Here are all our piles. Sometimes I plant locally collected seeds in there, but mostly I want to see what happens once the structure of a savanna is there again. I'm hoping there's enough left that the prairie plants will come back. If it's flat, we mow every spring to control the brush, to keep it from coming back. And this is one of those places after a couple years. So it's starting to look more like a savanna, getting there. We often get asked about fire because a lot of, it's very commonly used as a management tool in prairies. We don't use it very much. One of the problems is it's very complicated and difficult to burn safely, especially with just two of us. Another reason is that unless it's done very carefully, it's very hard on animals, especially insects. We use it as little as we can. We use it if we absolutely have to, but we don't use it very much.
The Driftless area is also a great place to do citizen science. This is the monarch butterfly, and there's a lot of citizen science around that. There's a lot of other kinds of critters that are being explored by citizen scientists as well, and we help with that. Here's a page of Marcy's blog that shows the families of moths that she's seen here. Families are bigger than species. And so I started laying out the slide of the species and ran into a little trouble because there were more than I was expecting. So I yelled downstairs, "Marcy, how many of those are there?" And she came up with this a couple of weeks ago, but the number is higher now. To give you a sense of what's going on there, this is an annual party that we throw about moths, and on the left is the way that Marcy sees the moths every night. She goes out any night that it's not raining, puts a sheet up on the garage, shines lights on it, watches the moths, photographs the moths. The photographs on that site are simply astounding. And when the party is running, I pull the pictures off her camera as she's taking them and throw them up on a screen right next door so that people can see them a little bit bigger. And here's an example of what people would see. That's a grain of rice. There's a moth that's about the same size as a grain of rice. You can't really see it real well until you take a macro photograph of it and realize that there's a lot going on in those 850 species of moths that Marcy's seen. So we do a lot of stuff in that dimension. Another thing that we're really into is carbon footprint. And restored habitat like ours is a great carbon sink. The science is really muddy on this, but we offset somewhere between 20 and 50 families worth of carbon. Not sure where that falls. But we also do solar power. And we produce more solar power than we consume, so that's a carbon sink as well. And another kind of information that we record and share, sometimes with companies, sometimes with other citizen scientists, is the amount of power we produce and the amount that we consume. Green is when we're producing more than we consume. Red is not. That was a day. This is a week, a sunny week. And this is the years, a couple of years worth of the data. And what you can see is that most of the time we produce more than we consume. But in the winter, we time shift that power from the summer when we overproduce to the winter. So we like the grid. None of this off-the-grid stuff for us, because to get the batteries for this would cost millions of dollars. Another thing we do is share a lot of practical information about what we're doing. So Marcy shares a lot on her website. about how to do stuff in the natural realm. And we both share practical tips and techniques. It turns out ATVs, when you drive them on prairies, are pretty tough on the prairies, and so I have an article about that. It turns out some of the tools that we use are pretty obtuse. We have articles about that. We do a lot of community building through the web and online, in addition to face-to-face conversations that we promote through the web. And sometimes we tell grouchy stories. A big problem in our area is frac sand, because there are giant industrial corporations that have a different opinion about what to do when agriculture recedes.
So when we were preparing for this talk, we thought a lot about why we're doing all of this. There's so much wild land being lost every year from human development, and it's really important to us to start protecting and restoring some of these native landscapes. Otherwise, they're all just going to disappear. And it's especially important for us to concentrate on this unusual landscape in the Driftless area, because it's really unique, and the plants and animals that live there are unique, and they depend on that landscape to survive. It's also important to us to protect our some of our natural heritage, because a lot of the people who live in that area don't know the way it used to look. So it's really fun to have them come and visit and see some creatures that they haven't seen since they were children. But mostly we do this because it's fun. We love the physical labor most of the time. We really enjoy all the things we're learning about the land and how to care for it, and about all the plants and animals we see. We take several walks through it every day, and it's great to watch the changes in the spaces that we've worked on. It's fun to see how it looks in different weather and different seasons. And it's really nice to see native plants and animals in places that used to be cornfields. So this is the way we found to use our land once agriculture has receded. If you want to learn more about what we're doing and see these pictures on your monitor when they will look much nicer than they do on the screen, come to our website, prairiehaven.com.